Hi everyone. Once again, welcome to World Literature. I hope that kung nasan man kayo ngayon, you are okay, you are healthy, and I pray that you are still fighting for every battles that you may face. And even though we are not seeing each other real time, I hope that you are still happy and you would still gain relevant information in our discussion for today. So let's start by defining what world literature is. So, world literature is sometimes used to refer to the sum total of the world's national literatures, but usually it refers to the circulation of works into the wider world beyond their country of origin, and often used in the past primarily for masterpieces of Western European literature. Thus, world literature today is increasingly seen in global context. So, in this subject, we will be tackling different literary pieces coming from across the globe. So, I'm very excited for that. But let's have first an introduction and let's try to recall some of the information before that are very essential in understanding a specific text. So I have prepared here some slides and let's try to answer it correctly. All right, let's go. The first statement is when you analyze the rising action of a story to complete a plot diagram, you include what? Is it detailed descriptions for each event, a random sequence of events, or important events leading to the climax? You may pause this video if you want to think of your answer. So the correct answer for this statement is the last box. The important events leading to the climax. In rising action kasi, this is where the events of the story start to create suspense as the character faces conflict. So this is very essential for us to understand the climax. Kasi before we get into the climax, there will be a specific conflict that the character will face and that these events are crucial before we get into the climax. Okay, I hope that we are clear with that. Next, the terms plot, act, and stage directions relate to the genre of drama, stories, or poetry. So, obviously, the answer here is drama. All right, I know some of you would answer stories. Well, we may consider stories for plot and act, but we have stage directions, which refer to the genre of drama, because in drama, we present this one before an audience. It requires acts. Okay, the events are cut into different acts and it requires stage directions. Medyo matrabaho lang sa drama as compared to stories which contain different elements like rising action, denouement, climax, okay, Freytag's pyramid to be specific. Okay, wala siyang stage directions kapag sa stories compared sa drama. All right, I hope that we are clear with that. And I hope that you have gotten the answer correctly. Let's move to the next slide. So here, the difference between a biography and an autobiography is that is it they are written about someone's life rather. An autobiography is written by someone else for someone else, or a biography is written about someone else by someone else. Okay, how do we differentiate the two terms? All right, the correct answer for this one is the third box. A biography is written about someone else by someone else. Remember when you were still in high school or even in elementary, let's say, your teachers asked you to create your own autobiography, and then the title would be like My Autobiography. And then on the first paragraph, your first introduction is, my name is blah blah blah. I live at blah blah blah. I'm 16 years old. My favorite hobbies are blah 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 blah. You will state all of the facts or information that relates to you or to your personality, right? So in autobiography, just to differentiate, you are the one writing about your life, not others. As compared to biographies, someone is writing about your life. Okay, I hope that we are clear with the differences between the two, right? Next, the definition of setting is obviously the correct answer is the first box, the where and the when a story takes place. Because in setting, diba usually when we were answering the Freytag's pyramid, yung nakalagay muna sa una, exposition. And in exposition, this is where you can find the setting. So sa setting, when did the story takes place? Where did the story takes place? Ganun siya. And isusulat mo yung complete details. So, I hope na malinaw na din 'to, 'di ba? Alam na alam niyo na 'yan. So, here, what is literature? We have been encountering this word for quite a time now, ever since in elementary until you get into high school and even in college, right? We still encounter this word, literature. So, what is literature then? It says here it's a body of work, either written, oral, or visual, containing imaginative language that realistically portrays thoughts, emotions, and experiences of human condition. Usually, we are confined with the definition that literature is written, when in fact, it's also oral and visual. Okay, we consider oral and visual part of literature because before hindi naman uso ang writing, right? All of the stories, all of the literature that we have now are orally passed down. And also we consider images, sculptures as part of literature, right? And just to add, literature is connected also to history because in learning history, we would be able to identify different literatures that exist during a specific time. And in literature, we would be able to unfold the history that happened before. And we can learn, different traditions, cultures that people had before, and still we practice even in the modern world. So, as much as we want to define literature, we also have to consider its importance. So, let's take a look at the following statements. It says here, as part of the importance of literature, studying literature is like looking at the mirror of man, which reflects the history and traditions of people in the past. So every time we are reading something, may it be a novel, a storybook, a textbook, right? We usually gain something from it, especially if the literary piece talks about the history of specific time. For example, you are reading something about Jose Rizal. It will give you an idea of how literature lived his life before, his writings, his relevant works, and the like. It's like you are traveling past, okay, back in time when these people are still alive. So it's very interesting to learn literature because you are not just confined to one specific area, okay? it's universal. You can learn from different authors all over the world. And from that, when you have read their literary pieces, you will come to think of their traditions as to why they behave like that, even in today's modern world. All right. So next, in literature, we learn the culture of people across time and space. So this is somewhat connected on the first statement. Of course, when we try to look back from the history, we will be able to find different traditions from our ancestors, and you will discover the hidden meanings, okay, of the words that we do not understand, and from that we will learn, right? For example, I don't know if you're still familiar on the story Noli Tangere and El Filibusterismo, right? We have learned that when we were in third year and fourth year high school. Okay, from that literary pieces, famous literary pieces written by Jose Rizal, we have come to learn different traditions from the Spanish era, okay, because we have been colonized for 333 years. That's a lot of time, and it explains how the Spanish influenced the Philippines, or we Filipinos before. And up until now, some of the traditions, or most, if not all, are still reflected until today, lalo na sa mga kasal, sa mga kapag may patay, 'di ba, we follow specific norms and mores, and some of it are really lifted from the influence of the Spanish people. And also, we are greatly influenced of their religion, Roman Catholic, kasi sila ang nag-influence sa atin yan. Sila ang nagdala ng religion na Roman Catholic sa ating bansa. Alright? Okay, next. We understand not only the past of one nation, but also the present time. So this is somewhat connected with the two statements mentioned earlier. And lastly, we understand not only our own culture, but also the culture of other countries far from us. So it's not enough that we have known our own cultures and traditions, or how people behave in our place. It's also important to consider others' traditions and culture as well, lalo na sa mga ibang bansa, because you will never know, there will come a time that you'll go to that specific place, and that you have to be aware of their practices which are relevant for you to practice, kasi some might be offensive sa kanila. Okay, some of the things that you consider appropriate and right here might be the other way around on that specific country. So we must be very careful. And before we do something, let's try to educate ourselves first with proper pieces of information, so that we won't be misled of the things that we are not aware of. Okay, so let's try to have a quick review of these literary standards of literature. We have 6: universality, permanence, artistry, spiritual value, intellectual value, and suggestiveness. So let's go first with universality. In universality, it appeals to everyone, regardless of culture, race, sex, and time, which are considered significant. It describes a piece of writing that appeals to the hearts and minds of almost any reader. And The appeal is considered universal due to its ability to cross gender, racial, and cultural barriers regardless of the time it's written. Next, in artistry, this is where an aesthetic appeal to everyone is emphasized, thus possesses a sense of beauty. In artistry, it describes literature that is aesthetically appealing and reveals or conveys hidden truth and beauty. This type of literature appeals to broad audiences and possesses a sense of beauty in the writing that could even feel poetic. All right, so on the other hand, intellectual value, it stimulates critical thinking that enriches the mental processes of abstract and reasoning, making man realizes the fundamental truth of life and its nature. And usually in intellectual value, it takes readers into a bit of a gray area as they may have different opinions about what qualifies as intellectual. But from an academic point of view, intellectual works are relevant to the society and thought provoking. So, have you tried to finish a specific book, especially if that book is published somewhere outside the Philippines? Okay. So, siguro yung iba sa inyo na try na. And as you have finished reading that book, I'm sure that you have gained something from it and that it made you think that what you have known or your prior knowledge is not enough and that that specific book has given you more knowledge of something that you have lacked knowledge of. Okay, kunyari nagbasa ka ng book published in America and in that book or let's be specific, novel yung binasa mo, may mga practices doon from America na bago sa'yo. So, from that information, you will gain something. It will nourish your intellectual value as you finish reading a specific literary piece. All right? So, next, may we have suggestiveness. In suggestiveness, it unravels and conjures man's emotional power to define symbolism, implied meanings, images, and message, giving and evoking visions above and beyond the plane of ordinary life and experiences. So, a suggestive piece of literature relies on emotional power to convey symbolism, imagery, and messages. And the power of suggestion allows the work to inspire and provoke thoughts and understanding beyond the actual words written on the pages. Next, we have the spiritual value. Here, it elevates the spirit and the soul and thus have the power to motivate and inspire. It draws from the suggested morals or lessons of the different literary genres. One specific example for this literary standard is parable, 'di ba? Sa parable kasi magkakaroon tayo ng literary piece for that, the parable of the prodigal son. And with that one, sa parable kasi matututo tayo ng different values that we have to practice and maintain in order to have a good life. Same true when you are reading a literary piece, lalo na kung that story or selection is lifted from a very religious book such as the Bible, right? You will gain something that you'll be needing as you grow in life. Okay, literature has the power to do that in spiritual value. Lastly, we have the permanence. So in permanence, it endures across time and draws out the time factor. So we have the two factors, the timeliness and timelessness. So in timelessness, it has remaining invariably throughout time, while in timeliness, it occurs at a particular time. So in literature kasi, we can say that it's permanent if it's already written from ages ago and still it's relevant up until now. If you have read some works from Shakespeare, okay, it has been written many, many, many years ago and still it's still being discussed in different subjects or courses because there are some information there that are connected to specific lesson and that we have to take a look back again on those literary pieces written by William Shakespeare. Alam ko napanood nyo na din siguro yung Romeo and Juliet or you are already familiar with that story. Okay, some said that it's it's a stupid love story between the two young lovers that have warring families kasi hindi magkasundo yung families nila in the beginning of the story. I somewhat agree that it's a stupid love kasi pinatay niya yung sarili niya kasi namatay yung isa nang hindi niya alam na set up lang pala yun. Kasi si Juliet kasi nagpanggap siyang namatay siya. So, she has to sleep for a particular time and then magigising siya. However, nung nakita siya ni Romeo na nakahiga na dun, akala niya patay na, pinatay niya rin yung sarili niya. And nung napatay niya yung sarili niya, doon nagising si Juliet. Tapos nung nakita niyang patay din si Romeo, pinatay din niya yung sarili niya. And masyado pa silang bata, wala pa silang 20 years old, okay, when they are portrayed in that drama or yung mismong book. Okay, so it's a stupid love story, as they say. But then, we are still learning about these things up until now, kahit na matagal na siyang nasulat, because it has this literary standards of being permanent. Okay, it occurs in a different time, but the essence or the lesson is still there. And in permanence, we consider the timeliness and timelessness of a specific literary piece. Okay, I hope that we have differentiate these literary standards properly. So that's just a quick review of how we standardize literary pieces from world literature. So again, I have prepared here another questions or statements for us to answer and try to answer it for the best of your ability. So number one, the author's central message about life or how people behave is called theme, resolution, or setting. So our keywords here are central message. So when we say central message, we talk about obviously theme. Kasi in theme, this is the central idea. This is where the story revolves. Okay? Next. Number two. The problems the characters face in the story is called what? Is it the climax, conflict, or exposition? Okay, so the correct answer is conflict. And we will learn about the types of conflict later as we go to the other slide. Number three, the turning point of a story is called what? Falling action, climax, or setting. So keywords are turning point or turning point of a story. We call that the climax, okay? Because in climax, this is where the most exciting event of the story occurs. Okay, kumbaga dito na yung sampalan, okay, yung patayan, and all of the events that will make the scene more suspenseful as it reaches its peak. Okay, so this is an easy one to answer. The following sentence is written in which point of view? Yesterday, I went to the dentist. So our keyword here is the pronoun I, which refers to the first person point of view. Okay. So this is what I'm talking about the types of conflict. Here are the basic ones. We have man versus self, man versus nature, man versus society are all examples of here. Obviously, the answer is conflict. Kasi sa story, every story has its own conflict. So when we say man versus man, ibig sabihin yung bida laban sa sarili niyang tao. Okay? Tao versus tao. Sa man versus self naman, yung bida kalaban niya yung sarili niya. So there is a conflict between the person or the hero between his or her mind. Okay? Man versus nature naman, this is man against fire, air, or any elements of the earth that we have. Okay? Aside from the elements, earthquakes, any disasters also that will fall under that. And then man versus society, man against the people around his or her place. Okay, last statement. You have to answer this. People, animals, or other creatures in a story is called, starts with letter C. The answer is character or characters. All right. So we have the two main divisions of literature. So nahati ang literature sa dalawa. We have the prose and poetry. In poetry, we are already familiar with that. But in prose, hindi pa siguro masyado. So how do we differentiate the two divisions of literature? So let's take a look at this one. We have the poetry and prose here being differentiated from one another in terms of form, language, appeal, and aim. Let's start with its form. So it says here in poetry, obviously, we are writing that through verse. In prose, we are writing that through paragraph. So this is the basic differences between the two. In poetry kasi, since it's a poem, it's written in verse form. May it be free or with meter. Okay, that's a form of poetry. While in prose, it's in paragraph form. Okay. How about on the language? In poetry, we use figurative language. What are these figurative language? We have the idiomatic expressions. Okay. The words that will require analogy on the part of the readers, okay? Any language that will make a certain literary piece, or to be specific, poetry, more meaningful and more beautiful in a sense. While in prose, sabi niya dito, based on normal language. Why is it based on normal language? Because since it's written in paragraph form, we are usually writing directly. For example, when we are writing an essay, diba, we have the introduction, body, and conclusion. Okay, we do not use any beautiful words that will make our work more creative unless we are doing a, what we call that, something like editorial. Okay, when we are writing an essay about a person, that we need to creatively think of words that will define them, okay, or their personality. Pero in prose kasi, it's in normal language. We are stating information directly Okay, we use languages that will be understandable on the part of the readers without having to use figurative language. Okay? Kasi in poetry, when we are reading it, 'di ba, we feel that a certain poem is moving us kapag gumamit siya ng mga malalalim na words, ng mga words na hindi mo pa naririnig, or combination of words that makes the piece creative. Okay, poetry yun. Kapag sa prose naman, medyo mas mahaba siya kasi it's in paragraph form. How about sa appeal? Okay, where does poetry appeal? It appeals to feelings or emotions. I don't know, siguro sa henerasyon na meron tayo ngayon, kayo lalo kayong mga estudyante, na-try niyo na dati manood siguro ng spoken word poetry or you have delivered one already during your physical classes before the pandemic. 'Di ba ang gandang makinig sa mga spoken word poetry lalo na if it's written or delivered using the Filipino language, right? Ang gandang pakinggan lalo na kung may mga tugma and we feel the message of the story in the way that or in a way on how the speaker delivers his or her piece. Kung walang ka-emotion yung nagsasalita, hindi mo mafe-feel eh. But when the speaker has the power to convey his or her feelings directly to the audiences or the readers, 'di ba? Mas maganda yung poetry. Mas nata-touch kasi tayo kapag it's written in a poem. 'Di ba, kung papipiliin ko kayo kung anong gusto niyong ma-receive, a letter or a poem, siguro mostly if not all, sasabihin ninyo poem kasi 'di ba, ang poem pinag-iisipan siya. Hindi siya madaling gawin as compared to writing a letter which is written in a prose form kasi paragraph form siya, masyadong mahaba and lengthy na madali lang siyang gawin. Unlike in writing or creating or composing a poetry, mas mahirap siya and you have to think of your word choice. Okay? So, take note of that. Sa poetry, feelings or emotions. Sa prose naman, mental or intellect. Doon sa utak. Kasi sa prose kasi it's more informative. Unlike sa poetry na pag-iisipan ka pa niya ng kahit ano dyan, kailangan mo pang mag-analyze because it used figurative language like idiomatic expressions, okay, metaphors, and the like. Sa prose kasi direct tayo, so it appeals to our intellect. It's informative in a sense. So we gain information intellectually when a specific literary piece is written in a paragraph form. And lastly, we have the aim. So the aim of poetry is to stir one's mind and in prose is to give information. So ito na yung sinabi ko kanina. Since it's direct, it has to give information to the readers. While in poetry, it has to stir one's mind kasi nga hindi siya ganun ka-direct. It uses different or creative words to beautify the work itself. So I hope that we have a clear differentiation of these two divisions of literature. All right, we have the last slide. This is already familiar. Okay, familiar na to. Nabanggit ko na din to kanina. Here are the elements of plot. It's essential for us to understand this because it explains how the story started and ended. So first we have the exposition. So in exposition, this is where the characters are introduced. This is where and when the story takes place. So going up, we have the rising action. These are the important events that lead to the climax. So before we get into the climax, there must be a specific events that will be suspenseful as we reach the climax. So when we reach the climax, since nandito siya sa taas, nandito siya sa pinaka-peak This is where the most exciting part of the story occurs. Okay, and then going down, we have the falling action. This is where the conflict is being resolved. And then going down to the Noma or resolution, this is how the story ended. Okay, I hope that you have gained something from our discussion today. This is just a review of what we have or what you have tackled before when you are in high school, and I hope that you have brought up those information and I have added specific details to sustain and nourish your prior knowledge. So that's all for this topic. We'll see you again on our next topic or next literary piece, which is The Parable of the Prodigal Son. Yun lang. Good day, everyone.